Aye, water's the king, mate. Water's the king.
Aye, I managed to get to the toilet before.
Have you found that you're taking in more water?
Oh, aye.
Because you're fasting. It is a pure appetite suppressant as well.
Aye. I need to dial the thing a wee bit after changing, because I was doing 12-8 as my like on period,
right.
And that was fine when I was working the day shift. Whereas like now I'm doing like the last 4 weeks it's been like 10-9. So it's 4 days a week for the last 2 weeks. It's been 10-9. So like
right.
12 o'clock comes round and I'm not getting my lunch till like 3, and I'm like, right, okay, so I'm going to need to like maybe shift the window to like maybe 10 to 6 or 11 to 7 or something.
I find what works for you.
After 4 weeks, the first 4 weeks are 10 to 9, and then they move to this new rota where I'll largely be 12 to 9, like Monday, or 5 days or 7 sort of thing.
Right.
And then a month later they move to this office next to the house sort of thing. So it's one of the ones where I probably need to change it to new and then change it again sort of thing as the shift pattern changes sort of thing, just to make sure that I'm getting the best of it. Because the minute I'm in that other office, I'm going to be walking home. But I've been walking home for like harp on my cloud, but it's like 4 in the afternoon. Let's see, I found like trying to get the energy to like walk home for like basically here. The office is like the other side of fucking
Charing Cross.
Aye. 10-hour shift, 11-hour shift, then try to walk home at night. Try to walk home at night, and I'm like, just know what, I just don't have the energy for that. You know, it'll be fine once I adapt to the shifts and everything. But this is the thing: is by the time my body adapts to the shifts, the shift pattern changes, and it's another month. You know
Absolutely,
what I mean?
Mate, and I think that's. I mean, we'll just fucking. I'll edit in somewhere here, but I think that's an important sort of thing for people. Is that there's almost like this sort of like idealistic ideas, and one of them is, you know, you should work out in the afternoon, and that's when you're at your optimum. And that just doesn't work for me, especially when I was working, because what I used to find is that 5-6 o'clock at night, I'm not going to the gym.
No.
Like if I get up and do it first thing, good. And when I was working 9 to 5, I was a manager, so it was good that you could do this. I would take my lunch at 11 and I would take an hour and a half, because I would have an hour and a half hour break, and I would go to the gym quickly and go back. That really worked for me. But see, when I tried to do the 5-6 o'clock, I would walk down, get to the corner of the gym, and just all the excuses would just be like, nah. And you've got every excuse in the world. I've been working all day, I'm tired, you know, whatever, all the hurdles you've had to face all day, I'm no breaking my fast to 6 o'clock, I'm, you know, empty stomach, all that. So I just see like stuff where it's like, oh, you should try and do it like this. It's like, aye, that's great if you've got a load of money and you don't need to fucking work, and your routine's your number one priority in your life. But on the routine stuff, I mean, as you know, and I don't think I've posted anything on socials. It's been a rough sort of couple of weeks for me and for, you know, close family, and had like a sort of big death in the family. And I think I'm actually like feeling really positive, because what I've managed to do this time, I mean, I think grief's one of the huge things that you face in your life. I don't think it can be like downplayed, but I've managed to like pull the levers. And what I mean by that is that I've like I decided I'm going to go to the gym, but I'm not going to like track it, because I can't push myself now. Like what's important to me right now is rest. So getting up at like 7 in the morning, like no setting alarms, making sure that I get enough sleep. I had 4 of the last 4 weeks, but 3 clients graduate their CBT, and I was just like, right, I'm not going to take on anybody at least for a couple of weeks. And I actually feel really like, as much as it's been a hard time and I've been down in my mood, I actually feel like I've pulled the levers really well and sort of like managed myself probably the best that I've ever managed to do it. You know, like I think it's very easy for you to put pressure on yourself to keep going, and you did. It's like, see, when these big events come into your life, it's such a drain. It takes away like 75% of the energy that you've got, and if that 25% needs to be used to get to work and pay the bills, then that other 75% I need to rest. Of course. So I've been really like happy with that, really, through like an adverse sort of period. It's no your norm at all, is it? You know what I mean? Like, no, usually what I would do is I would put my foot in the gas. You don't spend a lot of time standing still. So that, I think, is a bit of an error or an eye-opener. And I think that if you have like things that you can put your foot in the gas, like, you know, redundancies or whatever, the other things that I faced, that's great. But I think that this time, I think it was like 2 or 3 days in, I was like, I I can't keep going like this. I'm going to burn myself out. And I think that it's kind of like all the training and all the mental health stuff that we've been doing. I said this last year when it came to COVID. It's like, this is your chance to sort of flex your muscles in a way when you get these things. And I think that I've no flexed it. I suppose it's like a sort of to myself. And it just gives you confidence going forward. You sort of get that idea in your head of, fuck, I can really do anything now. Whereas, you know, 2 years ago, I would have been like, fuck, you know, I don't know what this is going to mean. This is like uncertainty. And now I think that I can kind of do anything in that regard. I just need to be really aware and know what are the things that I need to prioritise and the things that I can scale back. And one of them's been like diet and exercise. But as I'm coming out the other side, I'm starting to ramp them back up, but feeling really good about it rather than being like, oh fuck,
this is a chore. This is a task that I need to do because if I don't, I'll feel like shit and all that kind of stuff. Giving yourself a bit of permission to like mix it up is definitely useful. You know what I mean? Like, we've had this conversation a few times, or you know, similar to it, both you know, on air and off air sort of thing. And like, I've been in a weird transitional period as well, and I think it's probably why maybe. As I say, I was saying the other day on social media, like, we went for like about a week to maybe like once a fortnight or something like that. And like, I think in the past, that's something that would have made me a wee bit anxious, a wee bit angsty, and, you know, no necessarily having anybody lined up and all this kind of stuff. Because usually we've got folk, at least if we've not booked them, we've got, you know, we've had the conversation, we've got like names lined up and, you know, a plan for when they're coming in and all that kind of stuff. And like, that's not really happened in the last few weeks either for both of us. And like, again, because the transition I've been going through, like, you know, I'd alluded to it in, you know, the episodes with Jubemi, with Helena, as we were talking sort of mental health, that I was having a sort of pretty rough time. You know, obviously had to go back on medication. We had a wee chat on one of the short episodes we did about therapy. I've engaged a therapist. And I've also recently joined like one of the sort of men's sort of talking groups, peer-to-peer sort of support groups.
Right.
We've had a number of them in on the show. I've always, I know we've both always sort of valued the work that they do. And I just thought, you know what, let's give it a try. What have I got to lose here sort of thing. So that was at a time where probably I was in the process just sort of bottoming out a wee bit. And the last couple of weeks have been a real lesson in how sort of quickly it can turn around. And taking action and all that is great, but at the same time, for you, it's almost like we've had a role reversal where I'm on the front foot and usually I'm the one that's kind of like, it's all cool, it'll work itself out, and you know, usually you're the one after it and you're the one that's like, no, I'm enjoying that wee bit of time that I've had. So it's a nice wee bit of role reversal there, but taking the action that I've taken in the recent weeks has actually led to, like, you know, I've started the fasting, as we're saying, but I've, you know, recently changed jobs. So I'm not going to name obviously previous employers or, you know, sort of bitch anybody out, but I was pretty unhappy in my previous job for a number of reasons. And I was dying to get back into call centres, and I managed to find a place that is in the process of building up and has a lot of time for us. And in a matter of like 4 weeks, I've went from being like, fuck, I need to go back onto my meds, to like, I'm having an adult conversation with a qualified person about what's going on. I'm, you know, engaged with a peer-to-peer support group where, you know, I've not actually managed to make it every week with the job change, but even just actually knowing that there's other folk there that are going through what I'm going through, and when we're having those conversations, like, that's been something that's been like extremely reassuring, because it is like when you're having a shit time, it's easy to feel like you're on your own.
Absolutely, mate, absolutely.
So I mean, I think I'm kind of like on the upswing now, similar to yourself, but in a sort of different way, where I haven't been out of the path before. You know, I always know how to dig myself back out, but I feel like I've done it sort of more effectively this time, because I've always done it or tried to work shit out for myself. You know what I mean? Like, and then you can only get yourself so far. I think I said that in the shot, that, you know, there's only so much you can do yourself. You know what I mean? Like, and we always say ask for help, but that's something I wasn't really actually doing. So having taken those steps now, like, I feel like infinitely better, and I know that these things are now there at my disposal as and when I need them. And it's ironic that having them there has made me feel less dependent on them, even in a short space of time. You know what I mean?
Aye,
Whereas
absolutely, mate.
they felt like an answer like 5-6 weeks ago. This will be the answer, this will be the answer. And now, sort of whatever, a month or so later, it's more like, aye, these were extremely helpful. Like, but at the same time, I'm comfortable on my end as well. You know what I mean? But at the same time, I know I've got these things I can reach out to, and it's taken a lot of the pressure off me. Like, my head has been clearer in the last 2 to 3 weeks than it's been in fucking years. Like, where I had a wee moment the other week, girl, where I actually just woke up like an hour early before starting my new job, and I had that like sensation that I had, the anxiousness that I had when I was in my old job, where I was like, fuck, I need to get up, and can I take 10 more minutes before I need to get up and get the bus and all these other things. And I had that in the new job, and I had that moment where I actually like interrupted it, was able to just go, this is nonsense, like this isn't valid anymore, like fuck off. You know what I mean? Actually, absolutely. Like spot that chain of thought, that, you know, thing that's inside me that's like, as you say, ramping the noise up, and now I can actually like almost like push it to one side and be like, no, like that's you're irrelevant here, fuck off. Mate, you know what I mean? Like, so I've been kind of, as I say, on the upswing myself.
Absolutely, mate. And you know what I mean? Moments like that, which I would, you know, say to somebody that was in therapy with me, that's a breakthrough. That's a real huge breakthrough moment. The moment that you see your attitude before you start to act on it and you can correct it. And I think that, I mean, honestly, mate, I couldn't be happier to hear you say that, and I couldn't be prouder to hear you say that you've actually like changed the way that you're tackling it, because it's almost like the whole, you know, the cliche about the whole Einstein thing and the definition of insanity is doing the same thing again and expecting a different outcome. But to hear you say that the speaking to a therapist and the peer-to-peer support, it isn't necessarily, like you say, the answer to your problems, but it gives you that sort of comfort that if you need support, it's there for you. Is that the only difference that you've noticed, is that you can sort of see the way that you're sort of thinking about stuff? Is there anything else?
It's still quite early. I mean, one of the things I'm trying to, you know, combat as part of it is my cynicism, sort of negativity. Because obviously there's, you know, plenty of times here when we get into politics and all the rest, where like, sure, the cynicism is almost, you know, semi-sarcastic, but at the same time, it is also a kind of, no instant reaction a lot of the time in everyday life, but I tend to be like, downside first, and then we see what comes at the end of it. So I've been doing a lot of work on just trying to be more mindful of like positives on a day-to-day basis.
Right. Doing like gratitude and stuff like that.
Aye. Also, like notions of like service and stuff like that, which I picked up at the men's group, which was something I really liked. You know what I mean? Like making sure that if anybody needs it, and I can, you know, volunteer myself, or neighbours cut the grass or whatever stuff that 6 months ago or 6 weeks ago even I'd have been like, fuck, you know, this wee old wifey next door wants me to go and cut her grass or do her hedge or whatever it is. Whereas now I'm like, right, okay, this is an opportunity to like do something for somebody that's actually not going to cost me anything. It's going to take me like an hour on a day that I'm off. So, you know what I mean? Like, so like wee things like that. But no, at the minute it's more about just the thought process. Like, as I say, you know, I'd got quite good at digging myself out because I'd, you know, sort of fell in the hole enough times. But at the same time, I was never able to like stoke myself falling back in the hole again. And I'm not saying that I've done that now. It's not like I'm magically cured or anything like that. It's just, I feel there's like a framework now that I understand on a sort of like logical basis. You know what I mean? Like, been doing a bit of reading and stuff like that. But it's just been like, probably the main one is if this is something that I think is going to make me uncomfortable, like, at least go and try and do it. Whereas before I'd have been like, as you say, the excuses and all that kind of shit sort of thing, you know what I mean? So diving into the new job with 2 Huns has been like the first one. People are lovely, and like, I think there's a lot of opportunity there, and it's back in an environment that I want to be in. So like that's like all big positives. Whereas I think when I started the last job, I was kind of like, okay, you know, just tuck in, you know, with me having the family and that. The priority since getting involved with Stacey and the Wayne was always make sure there's a roof over our head and all the rest of it, and none of the rest of it really matters. Comes for like that older generation sort of parental thing where it was like, they didn't have ambitions in terms of jobs and stuff like that. It was just about putting a roof over the head and keeping the head on, keeping food on the table. And
Absolutely.
that's always been the bare minimum. Whereas like I'm back in a headspace now where I actually can, there is opportunity, there is wiggle room, there is space and all these types of things. Mate. So aye.
For sure. I mean, there's that whole cliche about the growth mindset, but see when you realise that it's a game of inches, as in the sense that like, and I'll use a real example. I don't think that the client I'm going to talk about would really mind, but I won't mention any names. That we got like 6-7 sessions in, and they were like that to me. Like, I don't really. They had a specific circumstance in their life that they needed support with, and it had went by, and it was almost like that moment where it's like, I'm fine now. And I'm every week I'll say to people, do you want to come back next week? It's giving them that option. And they were like, I don't really think, that I want to come back. And so I do a thing called relapse training. We'll talk about that in a second, because I think it's really effective for trying not to fall back into the holes. But they were like, other than the thing that you've supported maybe, and thanks for that, I don't really see what we've done. And I was kind of like, well, let's talk about that. Like, I would love to, if we've not done anything, I would like to know, first of all, because I want to know how effective this is. We got like an hour later and they were like, you know what, we've done so much work. And it's because as a game of inches, like your mental health isn't going to just change overnight because you go and you engage with somebody. And I think you're at that 3-week mark where, and I know that you're not going to do this just based on this conversation, where people take their foot off the gas and they'll maybe allow themselves, I'll no fast a day, and maybe this is the point now where I can start to do these things and blah, blah, blah. Or let's not go to see the therapist this week, I'll skip a week. What I would say is that sort of 3-week mark, it's like, see where you're in 6 weeks and get that sort of 2-3 months down the line with, you know what I mean? But
this is something I was wary, because I have had that cycle in the past where maybe not the 3-week mark, but within 3 to 6 months, I'm back on the down slope and these types of things. So one of the big things was making sure that I still kept up with like the peer-to-peer group when on nights or weeks when I was feeling all right. And actually, one of the things I really felt about that group when I went there the first time was like a level of sort of kinship with people that I'd literally sort of never met in my life. And those sort of open and sort of honest, direct conversations that you're kind of no forced to have, because if you want to go and say nothing, you can go and say nothing, you know what I mean? Like, but when you see the other people sharing, you trust that you're in a safe space and that you can do that as well. And I found myself going a couple of weeks just because maybe somebody else needed to hear that it can be all right again, that you can improve. And like, it was good for me to even go, well, I don't need this tonight, but like maybe somebody needs to hear what I've got to say.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Like, so that's definitely part of the no sliding back, because I think a year ago I'd have went to a couple of weeks, my meds would have settled, I'd have got a new job, and I'd have been like, cool man, we're on a level keel again, like we can get back to normal. And I think that was always my mistake. As I say, now it's like, do you know what? The work needs to be kept up.
Absolutely, that's what I'm talking about. It's like that sort of 2-3 week mark where if somebody was to say, how do I pinpoint where I've made the choice that's ended up 6 months later that I'm back in this hole? It's like at that 3 week mark, it's like almost this euphoric feeling of, I feel good again. Sort of, there's a wee tidal wave that comes with that, and then that can sweep you along for like 6 to 8 weeks, and then you start to, and that game inches starts to go back. And I make the analogy of like people say it takes you 6 months to build a certain level of fitness and it'll go away in 6 weeks. I don't think that's an exact science, it's more an analogy that people find rings true, and I use that same one. If the work that you can do in a sort of 6 month period positively on your mental health can be undone in a sort of 2-3 month period in half the time, because that's what we're used to. That's the muscle memory kicks back in, you know what I mean? I mean, I'm going to be honest, this is the best you've looked. Even just like your skin and everything, like this is the best you've looked in a long time. And I don't think there's any coincidence between that and you feeling this sort of positive wave. So mate, I'm super happy to see you there, you know.
It makes a difference for being a miserable fucking cunt all the time, doesn't it?
Even if the positivity lasts for like half an hour a day.
That wee cynicism just get back in now.
But I mean, I'm sure we've got hunters to cover, and I've got a wee sort of note in mind stuff that I wanted to cover. But I think the first thing that I really wanted to sort of talk about.
I've got no notes. I'm going jazz this week. We're going free form.
Cool. I mean, I think that takes a level of mental stability in itself not to feel anxious enough. But I don't really know where to start, but I think the one that I would really like to start with is the drug deaths in Scotland that we've seen sort of during the weekend.
Yes.
We would be, I mean, the amount of things that we speak about in sort of Glasgow centric and Scotland centric, I think we'd be very, very nose blind not to talk about what the latest results.
Yeah.
And
it's Groundhog Day again.
It kind of feels like it, doesn't it?
It does.
But it also kind of feels to me, in a certain respect, like these sort of statistical outcomes, which are horrific, are an indicator of bigger issues that aren't just the SNP and aren't just Scotland, in the sense that this, if we were to actually, like, if I was to think about it in a more wider sense, this drug death pandemic started in America. It didn't start here. The
opioid crisis,
crisis and stuff.
Probably go all the way back to things like crack and all the rest of it as
well.
well.
I think that's exactly what I was going to say. You know, when I was thinking about it, I don't think these deaths have really went away since the 80s and 90s, and when heroin really like ripped the heart out of the working class communities in Scotland, especially Western Scotland. And I think that I don't know much about it, but I do think that this is being used as a tool, in the sense that what difference is any political entity going to make in a 12-month period, especially when the changes that they tried to make happened like 6 months ago. Feels like one report came out in 2020 and it was bad enough. In 2019, it was for year 2018, 2019, and then this new report's come out for year 2019, 2020, and people are using it as a way to go, well, SNP bad, and look at. But at the same time, a parallel report has come out about Northern Ireland, Wales and England that shows the same rise. So this feels to me like an indicator of a bigger thing. And I think my personal opinion on it, and I suppose we'll put it to you after I say this, is that the communities in the last time we seen this level, a sort of, well, like death in this sense, we go back to the 80s and early 90s, and it was another Tory government. And I suppose people be like, well, you're saying like Tory bad, SNP good. I'm not saying that.
No.
The SNP need to take a look at this.
There's a shoulder of blame for everybody.
Absolutely. But we also need to not just be like, this means that this is bad here. The Western world is seeing this happening across the board. Suicide is up across the board. Drug deaths are up across the board. And I think it's an indicator of austerity. And I can't get away from that, personally. You know what I mean?
I mean, the heroin epidemics and, you know, things that we talk about coincided with, the wholesale destruction of, like, British industry for, you know, sort of profiteering, whatever, 20, 30 years ago.
We just had this week, had the Prime Minister sort of laugh at it and say that they did, that was when the UK had the biggest impact on climate change, was when they shut the coal mines. And
we were preparing for stopping the climate emergency.
What a load of fucking shite that was.
He's not talking to us. It doesn't have to talk to us. He can talk to the 26% of fucking Little Englanders that vote him in and win a 90-seat majority. So people that think that Boris Johnson is coming up here to do anything but talk to his base, and to come up here and talk to his base is to come up here and fucking insult us and patronise us, because that's what got him where he is. You know what I mean? Like, this is not a new thing. He's done it his entire fucking career. You know what I mean? Like, as have a number of his cronies. I kind of brushed it off. It's just, I can't take anything that guy does or says particularly seriously at this point, because there's an ulterior motive behind all it, and this was another example of it. But the point about drug deaths and stuff like that is a complex one. Like, I get what you're saying, where we go, it's been 12 months. We had Bob in, Bob Doris, and he was very, like, passionate about putting this right, and I still believe him, even in, you know, the face of this year's results. The 250 million over 5 years is a huge amount of money, but like when we had Cisco in, Natalie, I mean, she scoffed at the idea that her and her guys would get any of that money or any meaningful chunk of that money. And when we look at them recently popping up on, like, the front page of the Daily Record, like, and finally starting to get a bit more sort of widespread recognition of the quality of work that they do, for me, they should be, like, so far near the top of that list that it's not even funny. So I don't know if there's still concerns there. I don't know where the money's went in the last year. But 1,400 people is avoidable. And like last year when these figures came in, what annoyed me the most is that we're in the middle of a public health crisis. You know what I mean? Like the pandemic has been item number one on every sort of government, every council, every authority's list for nearly 2 years now. So to let the ball drop on what is a public health issue elsewhere is just fucking scandalous. And on the flip side, I know that people are going to go, you know, the Douglas Rosses and whatever the fuck are going to try and capitalise on it. They're being very smart in the sense that they are not saying SNP bad explicitly. They're framing their criticism in very empathetic language, but it is drawing attention to the fact that the Scottish Government has failed on this repeatedly. And it is repeatedly, because as much as we talk about 2019, 2020 and 2021 seem to be like the big ones that have caused the headlines, like the SNP government have been failing on this issue for 7 years. You know what I mean?
I think that I need to bear that in mind, you know, and really, I think that after like what I said earlier,
and let's be honest with you, they only started giving a fuck because they thought it was going to hurt them in the build-up to an election.
Absolutely. I think that there is a side of me that, you know, and I just had a quick Google there, and it's like, you know, public health spending in the UK in real terms has been cut 13% since 2010.
Yep.
That's how that isn't anything that no matter what who's in charge, Labour or otherwise, they've got no say on that. Zero fucking impact on that. And anybody that says that, well, they can make that decision, it's like, well, they need to take it away from somewhere else, right?
Yes.
If the UK
it's
government,
a forced managed decline.
Yeah, absolutely. And if anybody in England was to point that out, you will, like, drug deaths are going up, government spendings went down 13% in real terms. That means that it's probably trapped dramatically more than that. Or statistically, they'll be able to tell you that they've increased it, but we're talking about in real terms. That would be valid, but if we did it in Scotland, it would be like, oh, well, you're deflecting away. I think I would say that exactly. I would echo exactly what you said. The SNP government have repeatedly failed on this. It's not good enough for the government to wait for reports to make the media for them to put their spotlight on stuff like drug addiction in a country that has a historical drug problem, drunk and drink problem, you know.
Dude, I was seeing the last week in my previous job, as I said before, I worked very close to Central Station. It is, in some senses, you know, the sort of centre of the town, you know, kind of in that there, between there and George Square is about as central Glasgow as it gets. I was out having a cigarette break, like random Tuesday, Wednesday afternoon, whenever it was, and I was, you know, whatever, 30, 40, 50 feet for a policeman, you know, like round the corner and across the street or whatever it is. Like, it's quite a heavily policed area. And just sat on the street, there's a woman just buzzing gas out a can. Now, you know, I'm not saying the measures there should be punitive, you know what I mean? I'm not saying like arrest or whatever it is, but when we have police, we have traffic wardens, we have these people who walk about the town and, you know, hit you with fines for dropping cigarettes or spitting out chewing gum or whatever it is, but then is walking past people who are clearly in need of some sort of assistance and support. Like, you know, it's not just the SNP, there's like levels to this, and like at all levels we need to do better. But that improvement needs to be led by somewhere, and for me it is up to the government to lead that change.
And I think that the encouraging thing for people in Scotland is that finally we're hearing the government talk about things like, you know, like assisted sort of
DRDs.
What would you call that? Drug
so there's safe consumption rooms.
Safe consumption rooms, that's what I was looking for, and I think that that's a positive step in the right direction for me. But again, what comes out of England is we're no behind that. And see if you look at some of the commentary on it, it's been absolutely fucking horrific. I mean, I seen a guy with a blue tick, you know, Guardian, you're like, right, no name his name, being like, why would the answer to drug deaths be facilitating more drug taking? And you're like, mate, if you want to ignore the science, that's fine. But stop fucking spewing your bile everywhere. Like, you don't just automatically get to have an opinion on this because you're a fucking journalist. See, you've got I would say that they have got a societal responsibility to know the fucking science behind this, to know that these things actually reduce drug taking, that regulating reduces the consumption of these illegal drugs, because basically what we're doing is turning health into crime. And we've spoke about this so many times, I'm actually getting fucking bored of talking about it really, but not in the sense that I would ever get sick about shining a light on people's problems, because that's really like what we're here today, is like to try and help get these issues out and people aware of them. But just to the fact that we have this same fucking conversation and again about like, when are we going to be able to take this sort of like real action that's going to reduce?
It minimises it as well, because it becomes like that calendar of events where we go, you know, if you're active on social media, which I don't think either of the two have been very much recently, and it's maybe why we're a bit happier.
Maybe.
But the thought had occurred to me. But you're on social media and it's the yearly outrage about poppies and not wearing poppies, and then it's the war on Christmas, and, you know, there's this cyclical sort of news every year that comes round and causes the same bullshit that it causes every year. And I think it minimises the impact of those individual stories, because people get, as you say, like desensitised to them, because it's the same shit, the same talking heads talking the same nonsense on a 12 monthly basis, and every month it, you know, changes. Do we need pride? Do we, you know, all these other fucking things that are, you know, every time something comes round. And I think the drug deaths are in serious danger of becoming that as well, where it comes round on a yearly basis. We have our week of outrage in the build up to them, and we have our week of like hand wringing on social media and the, you know, in the aftermath, and then we move on to whatever's next on the calendar. And it doesn't actually really serve any purpose to anybody other than the government's going to come out and go, well, reports are going to be every 6 months now and instead of every 12. And you're like, fuck difference is that going to make? Like, I don't need to know what the half of your figures are. I need to know that you are taking steps that are going to actually like meaningfully combat this. That help is obviously not going to come for the UK government, because again, Johnson was talking to his base, you know what I mean? He was talking to that 20% of fucking pensioners who believe that, you know, weed not even once, you know what I mean? Like that generation, that's, you know, that boy rinse fucking demographic. Absolutely, is mate. The people that he's talking to there. So he doesn't give a fuck about progressive ideas. He gives a fuck about telling the people who vote for him what they want to hear, so that he can go and do whatever the fuck he wants elsewhere.
I mean, if on that sort of point about like just sort of speaking to their base, they don't care, and like, you know,
they don't care about anything.
One of the mate,
power and money.
They are extracting as much wealth as possible out of people to give away to their pals, and anybody that wants to argue against that, come on in. Sit down in front of me, like, because there is absolutely zero evidence that that's not true. In fact, there's just a wave of evidence that is true. All that they really care about is how much money can you make, and people that are dying for drug overdoses make no money, so they don't give a fuck.
They cost money.
Exactly.
Because you're having to put them through rehab and whatever else. I was talking to a fella the other day, just out, actually up at the new office, so having a smoke, and there's I'm assuming a hostel. It says hotel outside it, but I'm assuming it's a hostel, because I've seen folks sitting outside it who are clearly just on the front step with cans and stuff like that, pretty much 24/7. So this fella was sitting and he was like, oh, fucking state of rain, blah, blah, blah.
Who was them?
The guys sitting across the road on the stoop with like,
right, okay,
sitting smoking and drinking at like whatever, 2 in the afternoon. And I was like, aye. And then he like touched on the drug test thing, and I was like, okay, but he was coming for quite what felt a kind of sort of right wing attitude to it. And I was like, well, mate, this is something I actually know a wee bit about, and like, you know, this is like something that can actually help, even just some basic shit. Like, it was the safe consumption rooms that seemed to be like, we want to give them like safe spaces to shoot up. You're like, no, we want to give them as places where they won't die, and if they happen to decide that enough is enough and they want to get out and they want to get help, the ability to engage with that help is immediately there for them. And he actually seen him like go, oh, right, So there's an actual like thing behind it, and you're like, I no, there's an absolute thing behind it. But as I say, when guys like Johnson, guys like the media and the Guardian and these types of things take these stances, these what if kind of like devil's advocate stances, all it really does is muddy the waters, like we talked about the other week on disinformation. You know what I mean? Like most people who don't do drugs or have never done drugs are probably quite puritanical about it, and it would be very easy to believe that the right thing to do is to throw somebody in a jail. You know what I mean? Like, when in actual fact, you know, treating and talking to people like adults and giving them options is like a far more effective answer. But it's not a vote winner. You know what I mean? Like, it's not a vote winner for somebody like Johnson, which means it's no longer a vote winner for somebody like Starmer, because he's essentially just agreeing with him on pretty much everything half the time anyway. So it's one of them where we need to start looking at electing and engaging with people who are going to make these changes. You know what I mean? Like,
I think that one of the things that came out of the Cisco conversation, and I think that I've thought about this quite a lot, was, you know, like Natalie's attitude towards like the Portuguese model and actual like regulation and sort of like decriminalisation, and she was saying that she didn't feel like that was the answer in Scotland, and I actually felt a wee bit deflated by that. But as I've thought about it since, it's like Natalie's an ex-drug addict. Drugs have done nothing but bring absolute terror to her life. Why would she be an advocate for like? Of course. But personally, I can't get away from it. I just cannot get away from it. Like we'll go back to the thing that I was saying earlier about America. It's 2016 to 2018. They had this sort of opioid crisis, and really and truly, a lot of the deaths happened when the doctors took the opioids off of patients. Yeah, and they went back to like heroin. They ended up on fentanyl and heroin and killing themselves. And that is just, I mean, people could be like, that's circumstantial. But see, for me, that just shows you that if you are taking something where you know the amount that you're taking, unless you're suicidal, unless it's like death by addiction, you know, which absolutely happens. But unless it, and I think that when people know what they're taking and they know the dosage, I think it just, I don't know, I think they make better choices. And I think exactly what you said there, when somebody meets that bottom, if they're on the streets, I mean, you're talking about people, there's a woman that lives at that old Starbucks at Charing Cross in an old quilt, and it's stinking, and there's just empty gas canisters around her. That's shit that I've not seen in decades, mate. That is stuff that you're like, I remember people buzzing Tipex and glue and paper bags and quarantine back when I was a wee boy. I've not seen that in like 20, 30 years, man. This is a level that we've not seen in a while.
I couldn't believe it when I seen it the other week.
Craziness, man.
I could tell the hissing and was like, fuck's that noise?
I think that it's a combination of decriminalising it, allowing people to get their drugs tested. If they are going to take it, there's nothing that's going to stop them. Test it and tell them what they're taking. This might kill you. You might not want to take this. And then give them a safe space where they get treated like an adult, and if they want help, they know where to go for it.
I think there's maybe cultural barriers, and as you say, I get why Natalie, as a recovering addict, who will largely be engaged.
Not just
in
that as
abstinence.
Well. She'll witness a lot of bad shit with drugs, you know. Like, I'm no.
All the people around about are all heavily involved in abstinence as well. It'll be a big part of their programs and stuff. So it's an understandable point of view. I think it's hard to look at somebody like Portugal and see such a massive sort of culture difference and be able to definitely say that something like decriminalisation will work here. I would hope so, to an extent that, you know, I don't want to see people criminalised for using drugs for sure, but I don't know where, I don't know where we draw the line in the sand on that one, where, you know, it's about the individual or it's about, where we are now in terms of sort of punitive measures and stuff like that. I think the you know, UK culture will almost certainly result in it being somewhere between where we are now and where they are now. It's also important to understand that the Portuguese, it's taken like 15, 20 years to see the sort of meaningful results of these changes. So there's going to have to be a level of patience as well, because it's talked about in some circles as almost this sort of magic bullet, And it takes out the fact that there is a significant sort of cultural difference between us and Portugal, and it's taken nearly 2 decades. And, you know, governments change, attitudes change over 2 decades, and it's hard to, I think it's hard to like definitively say it, but we need to have something that decriminalises human beings for being addicts, because I think it's a medical condition.
For sure, mate. I think you nailed that there. There are many different things, but this comes back to what we're talking about, and I think that the people that we've spoke to in politics that sort of like use, or I feel like are using this sort of drug death thing as a sort of wedge, know that there's nothing that could happen in a calendar year to really impact us.
Yeah.
It took a fucking country that took radical changes a decade to see anything, 2 decades to see it properly bed in. So I think this is going to be something that comes up every year now. There's going to be a report that comes out that talks about, and we're looking for silver bullets. We're looking for short-term things that we can do that's just going to change it. That's not going to happen.
That's not there.
It's not there.
We're talking about mental health recovery being,
to be perfectly honest,
an ongoing
anybody
process.
that's Labour that thinks that Scottish Labour are going to do it is absolutely fucking sleepwalking. Like, it's almost like what he's talking about. Like, I can't get on board with this, because yous were in power for nearly 25 years in this country and done fuck all. Like, and well, I suppose as I say that, people could go, well, that's the point where between these Tories and these Tories where we made these sort of gains. But it was things like
and Labour controlled Glasgow for 80 years, and
it's things like, you know what I mean, the crime reduction unit. These were like the big changes. These were radical changes by people that were in these positions in the police force. That these are the types of things that we need to do. Like, we need to look at that and go, look at the type of change that they made and look at the impact that it had on knife crime in this city. Things like drug consumption, homelessness, they need radical change, and I just don't see it really happening. And I don't see the SNP doing it either. So it's not, that's just kind of like the bit where I sort of go, well, I'm not really that smart enough to really sort of come up with these things, but I don't see the big changes that we need happening anytime soon, which is quite sad. But it's also quite sad to see people think that there's a silver bullet, or there's these things that we could do that would just change overnight, you know. The
Tory positions and stuff like that, that's again, or even to an extent the Labour positions, like, you know, they're no wildly different on these in terms of the SNP bad element of it. I think there are people within the Labour Party who are very good on this in Scotland. Like Monica Lennon is, you know, pretty much brilliant on everything, to be honest with you.
Paul Sweeney's been great on this subject as well.
I think he's causing a few issues for guys like in the SNP in this one, because Paul is extremely good at what he does. Like, whether you agree with Labour or Paul or anybody else for whatever, like, he is definitively very good at what he does. And he has been ferociously banging the drum. And a lot of people are writing it off as, oh, you're just, you know, doing the SNP bad thing. And I don't believe that's the case, because we know Paul has been doing with Peter in the safe consumption van. You know, he's, you know, done it very quietly. It became more prominent, obviously, as he went for re-election and stuff like that. But this is something that I believe he does deeply, deeply care about, just as Bob did as well. But they need to get together and they need to fucking sort it out. Because finger pointing isn't the answer. But at the same time, on the other side of it, you know, the sort of Tory response has been very much like, does the SNP have a problem with Rangers? You know what I mean? Like, again, we've got a branch office in Scotland using London tactics to just basically speak to their base. Like, the Tories are only speaking to people or they hope will be of a Tory persuasion, so that if and when, you know, the next independence referendum comes, they might be able to shore up enough support to stop it. Like, every issue in Scotland that comes out of Tories' mouth is about the coming independence referendum. It's never about the actual issue in itself, because they don't give a fuck about the issues. Like, you know, it's laughable to think that today, when you look at their track record on all sorts of things up here, and then again this week we've got, you know, does the SNP have a problem with Rangers for Murdo, whatever the fuck, Murdo something or other?
Murdo Fraser, is it?
No, I can't even fucking remember his name now. He's a fucking clown.
He's an idiot.
He's an absolute clown shoe human being. And he's been spammed today with responses from people all across the SNP saying that, you know, during COVID, Rangers get £3.2 million worth of government money.
Aye.
Like significant.
The timing couldn't
something
have been
like
worse.
£80,000 more than any other club.
But the timing couldn't have been worse, because literally like 2 days after this absolute fucking jokey politician was in the newspaper writing an article about, and basically what they're saying is, because in England, I've seen quite a lot of people talk about how Rangers are the quintessential British club. So what they're saying is, do the SNP have a problem with Britishness? Aye.
Of course they do. They're the Scottish National Party.
I've got a problem with Britishness.
Aye.
Like, do you want to come in and debate about like the track record of Britain and how you've revised history to seem like somehow we're the eternal good guys spreading the love around the planet? You know what I mean? Like, it's a joke.
Yeah.
Your culture's a bit of a fucking joke in the way that you are harking back to these bygone days of propaganda, really.
It didn't even exist. These days didn't even exist.
But the timing couldn't have been, exactly, the timing couldn't have been worse, because he's in writing articles, and then like 2 days later, the British and Scottish government released these reports about the loans that they gave to the football clubs, and Rangers get the biggest loans. So it's like, do they have a problem with Rangers? No. Do they have a problem with Britishness? Aye. And it's kind of in their fucking name, you know what I mean? It's like,
it's pure Ronseal.
Does that mean that they are anti-English? No. Like, it's like, I've got a big issue with British nationalism, and I've got a big issue with Britishness, and what I mean by that is the bulldog culture, the Union Jack, the colonialism,
riding your way into Wembley for a cup final.
These types of things, like, I don't agree with them. I don't subscribe to them. I've done my own reading and talking to people, and sort of don't buy into it. Don't buy into it one bit.
But again, they're not speaking to you. You know,
they don't need me to buy into it.
They don't need you
but
to
I think,
listen
like,
to them.
that's what that sort of message is about. This is all sort of double speak, and by Rangers, I seen it as sort of Britishness, and then
I'm saying you can substitute anything, drug deaths, Rangers, whatever. Like, it's the same shtick. It's them talking to people that they want to agitate and make angry enough to vote for them, and it's not about any individual. You can take fucking any issue that's come out of Tories' mouth in Scotland in the last whatever, let's say forever, and it's nonsense about protecting the status quo.
Absolutely,
you know what I mean? Like,
absolutely. I'm going to
so it's a bit disingenuous to listen to anything they've got to say on these drug deaths and stuff like that. Labour, there are people I'm seriously inclined to listen to. I just wish that those people could get with the guys in the SNP who actually want to make something happen, and actually make something happen. We know the Greens are in on this. They want, they've already got that majority, quote unquote, but I think it would send a message to everybody that we can get stuff done in Scotland, because the Greens, SNP and Labour pulling together to actually like enact landmark legislation that actually protects and saves the lives of people, that, puts their dignity at the forefront of like how they're treated by society, would be a win for everybody, in the same way that like period poverty or marriage equality was a win for everybody. You know what I mean? Like, it's there. They just, like, it's pure open goal. Like listen to the experts, listen to the people with the lived experience, and then go and fucking make it happen. You know what I mean? Like, just get it done.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
We're going to need to pick my subjects now, because we're approaching the hour. But I think one of the huge, so there's two. So there's the sort of COVID anti-vax protests that we've seen a couple of weeks ago in London. I mean, it was across the UK.
Yeah,
just get ignored by the media, and the sort of what message that sends to people. I mean, we've spoke quite a lot about the anti-vax thing. I think the sort of James, is it Melville or whatever the guy's name is, and seeing a lot of the sort of...
This is the cunt that was in the fictional Butchers.
But right. Seeing a lot of the sort of anti-Brexit, pro-EU, lefty people sort of slide to the right. It's almost like you're standing in front of Katie Hopkins and applauding. Like, I found it unbelievable. Absolutely unfucking
So was that all
believable.
about involved in the anti-vax stuff?
Oh yeah, I mean, did you not see the protests? No,
I seen the thing on. I seen the footage doing the rounds of the nurse, the rightfully sacked nurse, who is this teeth and tits anti-vaxxer. She was talking at the steps of Trafalgar Square, and even her own son was like pure, like, I'm basically disowning you. because, you know, she's taking this moment of celebrity and whatever, you know, tried to run with it. I think that's all them are doing. Like, I don't know that any of these anti-vaxxers, you know, particularly the ones with the blue ticks and the audiences and stuff like that, I don't know that they necessarily believe what they're saying. Just think that, you know, your Hopkinses and these types of things have just found another issue that they can promote themselves off the back of. Again, they don't need, they're not trying to speak to everybody. They're going, here are 5% of the population that believe this bullshit. Like, how can I monetize that? How can I improve my profile off the back of it?
Absolutely fucking true for the ones that are, you know, like the Pierce Corbyns and Katie Hopkins was there and spoke. Tommy Robinson was there. Like, they were all there. Like, so basically, your fear of this vaccine and the fear that's been created in the hearts and minds of people over the course of the last 18 months with COVID is now driving people that were like progressives
towards the right.
But now that, you know, he's coming out going, I didn't realise and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, this is what's happening.
Just get called out on
this is what's happening. And you're not awake to what the fuck is going on. Like, it's a lesson
we really should have learned, because the far right weaponises and uses societal instability to promote itself historically through
this
all
is just
time.
the British version of QAnon. Like, this is basically what's happening. Like, they've managed to penetrate the middle class. And now the middle class are going, we should get back to normal, and it's all just a fear-based thing, right? But I was going to say something there, and I can't remember what I was going to say. Yeah, so there is the people that are grifting and the people that are sort of like seeing their opportunity to make money. And if people are like, well, what opportunity is there? Well, all these people have GoFundMes and shit. Like, you know, like, do you look at GB News, basically, you know, like people that are being sacked and let go by progressive sort of media and sort of going, and they're moving into this sort of channel of like Great Britain News, and it's like basically the right wing creating their own media. But I think I read an amazing sort of study, and it was on basically willful ignorance and what the guy had said in this. I can't remember what the actual wording was that he had used. I'll try and see if I can find the actual thing that I read. Motivated ignorance, he called it, where he was saying that the cost of proper information sort of basically outweighs staying ignorant. Then a human will go down this sort of way of finding out research that basically confirmation bias, but they do it in a way that's like not willful, but like subconscious. And it's when they start to go, and that's why all the PTs went to it, because all their businesses stopped overnight. Why do you think that there's very few nurses and medical staff that are coming out and going, COVID's no real? And a load of PTs now. You could go down the road that a lot of people that I've seen do and go, well, PTs are just idiots. And that it's the low IQ of your average PT. I don't think that's true at all. No. I think what happens is that, and we've seen it with Donald when he came in and spoke to us, when it impacts you in a way that means that you can't feed your family, I mean, you were talking earlier about just taking care of the basics and feeding the family, then you will seek out subconsciously the information that pushes you towards sort of going against it. And see, when I was reading through it, I was just like, this is so true. Don't think I've seen very many people that haven't been hit in the pocket come out and go, I don't believe in COVID. It's all taxi drivers, PTs, people like yoga, like all of these things that require face-to-face.
Aye, definitely.
I have not seen one qualified mental health therapist come out and talk about it in the same way.
I've not anybody credible anyway.
And I've not seen anybody that kind of has been able to just go on with their life, or very few.
Aye.
And I think that for people out there that are sort of like anti-COVID, and I'm sure that they've probably stopped listening to us long ago, but if they are listening to it, DM me and I'll send you this article, because it's basically like you are not aware that this is happening, and you basically lack this self-awareness to actually realise that you are making these fear-based emotional responses to something that requires logic and pragmatism. Because the thing that I had seen, and it is scary when you see it, there was a report that came out the week of the protests, and I can't remember who it was that spoke about it. It might have been Piers Corbyn and it might have been Katie Hopkins, but basically they were saying that the British government have put this this report out saying that 1.4 million people have had adverse side effects to the vaccine.
Okay.
And for somebody that is scared, that's all they need to know.
1.4 million is a huge number if you're sitting there wondering.
2,000 people have died. And it's
What are we classifying as adverse?
so hospitalizations.
Right, okay.
Right? But if you just do a simple Google search to go how many vaccines have been administered in the UK, 85 million, you're like, right, so it's under 1% that are having adverse, and 0.03% of people who have died in the week after.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, no offence, and I'm no downplaying people being in hospital or people dying, especially when it's in the thousands.
Yeah.
But that is like what you would call collateral damage, maybe. Or
There's
like,
probably a better statistical term to use, but I get what you're saying.
Cut that out, but it's, see, when the chance of death of something is 0.003%, it's almost non-existent in a statistical sense.
Yep.
That's where people are being sort of pulled in the wrong direction when they don't get the full picture. And if I was going to say, if somebody was like, well, what do we do about this? It's like, do some more reading that isn't just the British Medical Journal, that isn't just the Daily Mail. Stop. Like, I had seen a thing the other day getting shared by somebody where it was talking about how there was a study done in kids that showed that if you move people from Coca-Cola to Diet Coke, it has no impact on their weight.
Okay.
That's bullshit. Like, just purely on a physics level. Thermodynamics, calories in, calories out.
What is
the circumstances run about that? If you take in something that's got 500 calories per 500 millilitres and you drink 2 litres of that a day, 2,000 calories, and then you drink something that's got 0 calories, you're not going to stay the same weight.
No.
So it's circumstantial. Like, what happened in these test groups? Did they start as their consumption of Diet Coke went up to eat more food and blah, blah, blah? And it was just a guy on a podcast, and it took me 2 seconds in Google to show what happened in that and to show the studies. And you're like, it was like done over 5 people. They were all pure, massively clinically obese. They didn't actually measure their calories going into their body. So you're kind of like
that's just
listening to sound bites. It's pure
just
trash. And you're listening to these sound bites being put out there by people that do know what they're talking about to a certain extent and can speak very well about it. But you're sharing this information with it. And that's what my advice to people would be. Go one step underneath what you're listening to and what you're reading. Go and cross-examine it with multiple different studies and then come to your conclusion.
Yeah.
Because statistics and percentages and numbers can just be used. All you need to do is either add a percentage to make it look better or worse, or take it out so that you can't see the actual context behind what people are sharing, man. It's almost like what we were talking about with and disinformation is that we are now required to be able to analyse data.
Yeah.
And people that have never analysed data are coming out and trying to tell you that they have came to these conclusions based on the data that they have seen.
They don't even know like GCSE maths and like here is what this global health data
even
says.
People that have got degrees in these things are starting to get sort of caught up in it.
Definitely.
And luckily we've got a common friend that's a physicist and a guy that I respect and hugely intelligent. And whenever I see these things that sort of pique my interest in the statistics, I send it to him, and every single time he just comes back to me and goes, "They've done the maths wrong, mate. Here's what they should have done. They've come up with this number and percentages. They've done it wrong, and here's the bit where they've done it wrong." And
I know the man you're talking about,
that's
but
fantastic.
I find it quite funny that you're the only person I know with like an on-call mathematician.
We need them. Maybe that's where we're going.
Maybe this is he should start his own wee side hustle where he's like your mathematician for hire.
Will we wrap up on Billionaires Got a Space? Let's have a chat. Let's have a talk about this, because I think it's one of the things that that wasn't meant to happen. It's one of the it's one of the things. Oh, fuck it. It's one of the things that I think has been used in
talking a lot about it recently.
People have been talking a lot about it, and I think there's a couple of things that are happening. One, I think that it's been a nice distraction for a lot of, like even the Daily Record for being like lauding it, look at this amazing achievement and then the Jeff Bezos sort of like, anybody that works for Amazon or has bought anything for Amazon,
you've basically paid for this. I only spat at my telly.
But in a positive way.
He meant it in a positive way, but that is not how I took it. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. But I think like a couple of things come up for me, like as much as it is kind of a wild generalisation, the fortune, the money that is in the billionaire category in the UK, and I suppose Branson comes into this in a certain respect. I don't know if he's been counted because certainly doesn't pay any fucking tax in this country, never mind live in it, but has went up by 32% since the start of COVID, and the use of food banks has went up 36%. And people could be like, you're drawing conclusions, but I think that there's definitely a connection, and I think this is why it gets so much attention. But also,
so I don't know about connection, but a definite and obvious disparity.
Absolutely. I think that we can say that as people have been spending money and been in the house and Amazon and these things have become more popular, obviously the fortunes of these people have gone up. But I think that we spoke about this way back. Any government worth its salt is going to tax these people and use it as like a sort of COVID tax. If you've made year on year, if your business has made over, say, a 20% uplift or whatever, you need to pay an extra sort of tax code or whatever. And it'll only be on that profit that's 20% above whatever you made the year on year profits.
Yeah.
I'm an idiot, and I think that's kind of a sort of common sense approach. But the thing that I wanted to talk about is that Bezos's comments just shows you how disconnected these fucking idiots are from real life. Like, these guys are not...
I'm not sure Elon Musk was ever considered himself connected to real life, but
Richard Branson is kind of like held up as an example of rags to riches, which definitely. In itself, if we go back to the sort of Britishness thing, was nonsense. He was privately educated. I mean, he was in the cricket club at like 6-year-old. Like, he didn't come from nothing. He was dyslexic and he was written off, and he overcame diversity. He also started with a magazine and ended up a billionaire. All these things are true, but this guy came from a privileged position. But the idea that these guys are sitting about and getting fed food bank statistics and are getting fed COVID death statistics and are being told by advisors, listen, maybe you should take some of your fortune and give it back, is wild to me. These guys are so like entrapped in a bubble. Yeah. They make so much money for people that are round about them that nobody round about them is going to criticise them. Nobody round about them is going to go, Sir Richard, wait a minute, maybe we should hold off for a year. This is basically what we're seeing here is the world of a billionaire. These guys are in a frantic race to get to the moon. Yeah. Like, it's almost like the US and the USSR in the 60s using this sort of distraction of the space race as a way to sort of militarize these things, and that was their intention. But see, now what we're seeing is literally like wee boys with fucking their wee dicks in their hands going, I want to be the first to get there. Aye. All the while people are like starving to death in the countries that they fucking live in. I'm with you. You know what I mean? But I
think probably for me the comparison is more with guys like Rockefeller and Carnegie and the guys that sort of quote unquote built America. These guys started it as an oil and rails and railways and electricity and these types of things, but by the end of their time they were had overtaken their competition to an extent that they were massive conglomerates in themselves, and then essentially decided that they were going to drive each other into the sea. The end result being they lost, what would have been the modern equivalent of, billions, hundreds of billions in some cases. And, the end result was that they had to basically sort of make peace with each other. And after that, they went into philanthropy in a really big way. And it was one-upmanship again. So it was, like Carnegie Hall and these places.
They opened libraries and concert halls
all around the world.
Like public service things.
Definitely. And then, the Rockefeller, 30 Rock and these places. So they, even in, sort of billionaire retirement, were trying to outdo each other on the philanthropy front, so they were still in direct sort of competition with each other. And I think at the time, a lot of people would have probably looked at that sort of three-way kind of like battle between these guys for sort of dominance in American business in very kind of similar terms to Bezos and, Musk and all these other things. And I think, I get it, like Richard Branson and Jeff Bezos in space is a fucking ridiculous idea, because what does science gain by shooting old rich white men into space? Like, I don't know. But like with Rockefeller and Carnegie and these types of guys back then, the way they drove their societies forward in the aftermath of their actions was absolutely outrageous. Like, modern day America exists in the form that it's in just now, including like
motorways,
laws. Henry Ford brought in the fucking 5-day 40-hour week. You know what I mean? Like things like a living wage, and like, these guys, like, their legacy from their selfish desire to be number one and to be the first in that pissing contest, like, drove their country forward light years. You know what I mean? Like, so there is an argument to say that, maybe with Musk and these other guys that are, it's sort of boys with toys now, but there may down the line be some really massive leap forward after the back of it, in a similar sense to what we're talking about with these, predecessors. I don't see it. I don't know what it's going to be, but the potential for like things like commercial space flight and all the rest of it, I don't really see the point unless there's somewhere to go. Like, do I want to pay 28 million quid to go a lap around the earth? No. Would I like to have been the guy whose dad paid 28 million quid for me to go and do a lap around the earth? Probably. You know what I mean? But again, I don't see the scientific or societal benefit to it just now. It is at this moment in time boys with toys, but there are other examples where boys with toys inadvertently actually drove us forward massively.
For sure. I think the difference that I would probably that can really only come up for me in that regard is that people like Carnegie and Rockefeller, they lived in New York, so they were watching their city almost like collapse round about them, and that was why I think was part of the motivation for them to try and help rebuild it. Richard Branson stays in a fucking island in the middle of the sea. Like, he's got absolutely, I think that the way that the structures round about them are created is to remove them for these issues, because I've got this faith in humanity that if somebody like Branson, who speaks very well and talks about like the things that he wants to achieve and the things that he has achieved in his life, he would probably want to do something about some of the issues that people are faced if he could. I don't think they even know that it exists. Like the whole 80, how much is it for a pint of milk, when he got asked like nearly 10 years ago in Piers Morgan's, and he's like 80 quid. It's like, you've got no idea of real life, like absolutely zero. But I think that the distaste in people is this whole, the way that it's been sort of like, I don't know, it kind of feels like it's been dangled in front of them, and it's not been purposefully done this way. They think that they're achieving so much. They've achieved fuck all. Like, we went to space nearly fucking 50 years ago. Like, you're not doing it in radical. Like, you look like a fucking idiot in your jumpsuit.
Yeah.
And real normal people are actually really fucking angry at this, like, but they, again, with the comments and the way that it's been done and the pressure and about it, I think it's been fed back to them like it's been overall positive response to this.
They don't give a fuck either way.
I don't think they don't care. They don't know. They don't know. You know what I mean? But the worry for me is that apart from Musk, who I think will probably live in LA, and I'm pretty sure, because the reason I say that is that did he not try and get planning permission to bore a personalised tunnel to take him for the valley,
hyperlinks or something like that,
and you had to pay a certain amount of money to use it. It was basically a way for him to bypass traffic. You know, I'll give you $1 billion to bypass traffic every day. Absolutely. Now, that would be a great thing, I think, but it comes from this sort of selfish standpoint of he wants to get from this point to this point, how much you're going to need to pay, you know, and we end up in these the sort of conversations about two-tier societies or multi-tier societies.
So that's the thing that is the one thing that outside the, you know, chat of Carnegie's and Rockefellers and stuff like that. You know, we were talking the other week about where technology's gone and stuff like that, and there's this thing, altered carbon, and it's that very like futuristic dystopian thing where the rich can afford to live forever because they have digitized human consciousness and can basically back themselves up. But that's like literally a society of people that live above the clouds and like skyscrapers that literally go into space and all the rest of it. And you know, when you've lived 300 years, you've accumulated all this wealth, and it's got more and more, and you're just insanely rich to the point where, you know, you make your own rules and you live in your own reality. And I think that is maybe potentially where guys like Musk and Bezos and all that are going, because between them they could eradicate world hunger and not even touch the sides of the money they've got. You know what I mean? Like they could vaccinate against malaria or any of these other things like Bill Gates has tried today, and it's a drop in the ocean. I mean, Bezos's ex she's the richest female on the planet based on a divorce, but she's also given away more money than any woman in history. So I think after her settlement of like $68 billion, like she's donated something like 25 billion of it. Just like, take it, go and make a difference in the world. You know what I mean? Like, so like, how much is enough? Like, is, you know, 2 billion enough to live and set up your family generations? You know, down the line, can you buy a nice house? Can you, do you need 70 billion? Do you need 100 billion? Do you need 300 billion? Like, what are you doing with it? Where's it? You know, unless you're actually planning on fucking living forever, like,
which nobody is going to do.
What are you doing with it? Do you need to like regiment people's, you know, fucking toilet breaks to the second for efficiency? Do you like? Is that going to impact your 78 billion wealth? Yeah. You know what I mean?
Do you think that we need to stop a certain amount of money? Like, I've had many conversations with people about but like wealth caps.
People can't live with that because the wealth cap is aspirational.
I think that the wealth cap, look, you're not going to become a billionaire.
No, I know.
See if you're not already a millionaire. See if you're not born a millionaire, you're not going to become a billionaire.
No.
Bezos, like, the idea that Musk made it for fuck all's a lie.
Aye.
His grandpa owned a fucking jewel mine in South Africa. And Jeff Bezos came for a place of money as well. So the statistics are, you're not going to get there. So that whole aspirational thing is a lie. So anybody that argues that is lying to themselves.
Yeah.
So let's just say we go 2 billion. That's the most that any human being can have. And then after that, it will be taxed away for them. What are the arguments against that other than that lie? Because that, I would say that's probably been thought up by somebody that's rich, that doesn't want to give away and thinks, or somebody that thinks, well, if I became a billionaire, I wouldn't want. Nobody has got any idea, and I don't even think guys like Bezos and Musk have got any idea in a relative way how much £1 billion is. Like, it's so much money that, like you said, not even these three, one of these guys could eradicate world hunger, could feed, clothe and house every human being on the planet and still be one of the richest people on the earth. So where do we draw the line?
It's a tough one. I mean, can you know, when we can't wear masks without adults throwing tantrums, can you imagine the tantrums we'd get if somebody said to you, the government is now going to limit how much money you can make in your lifetime? Like, as much as the aspirational thing is nonsensical, like, statistically it's unlikely in the extreme that it's ever going to happen, but we all like ourselves, you know what I mean? Like,
of course,
it's one of the ones where I'd like to see proper taxation. I think that's where we start, is actually saying, right, well, I'm paying whatever the fuck it is, like 33 pence on the pound or whatever it is in tax, or, you know, national insurance
paying
and
zero.
Like,
it's paying fuck all.
So fair and like equal taxation, like, is probably, and going this, oh well, I make more, so I should pay less because I still contribute more, and you're like, fuck you. Well, let's just put a number. Let's just say it's 35% for everybody.
I heard
and just get on with it. You know what I mean?
Quote for the guy that's the I don't know what position he is, but basically he was the top dog at Vodafone before Vodafone made their very rich deal with Osborne to settle a £6 an 80 million pound tax bill for 6 million.
Aye.
So that's a discount that nobody gets, you know. Like,
aye. If I just stop paying my tax and walk into the tax office and I'm like, I'm looking for like 75% off of this. They'd be like, here's jail.
Aye, exactly.
You know what I mean?
Exactly. His sort of thing was that, well, we pay this amount because we employ, and this is another lie. Is
and the employees then pay the tax?
No, their labour, you're making profit off of their labour, and their labour gets taxed. You don't pay it, and this is the problem: is that these arseholes think that they're paying it. It's like personal. And it's like, it's not, mate. Like, there's a government that prints that money. There's a guy that works to make that money, and then he buys shit. There's a whole set of circumstances that need to exist for you
like
to be wealthy. And the problem is that I feel like we're edging closer and closer to the fucking guillotine with them. That there is an appetite within the Western world, and we've seen it with them storming the Capitol, and I think we've kind of seen it with the COVID, like the anti-vax and people rejecting these health messages that are coming out to go, this is to stop. What I think is going to happen is that they're going to isolate themselves so much that people are just going to end up attacking them. They're not going to be able to go out in public. They probably already can, to be perfectly honest. But I think that I listened to a guy called Alan Watts the other week, and it was like an hour-long lecture that he did, and he was one of these guys that was a university lecturer at one of the big colleges in America during the 60s and get fucking hero dosed with LSD and started going here, you should take this drug, along with like Hancock and all these sorts of radicals at the time. And this sentence has just stayed with me, and he said that if only human beings would realise that if they found a balance, they could have it all. And that's what I would love them to hear, is that the balance is tipped, and you are the only people that can put it right, because the people that you're putting in these positions of power are working for you, and they're not going to tip it. Your influence is you've got it all. If it keeps going the way that it's going, you're not going to have anything the same as everybody. I think that the climate is about to erupt on us. Like, look at Turkey, look at LA, look at Australia, look at the weather that we're getting here and the floods that we've seen in England the last couple of weeks. I think that these people don't realise that they're human, and it's like the whole thing, you know, there's only two things that are certain in life, death and taxes, and I think that they think because they've skipped the taxes that they're going to be able to skip the death, and it's like, it's not going to happen for you, mate. But
I never thought about it like that,
but anyway, that sort of quote for that guy is that he was basically talking about balance, and he was talking about humans have got this appetite for more, but what the one thing that you can do for yourself is actually be aware of when you've got too much, because and that was his quote, was that if they only woke up to it, if they found balance, that they could have it all. But it's when the balance tips in the right direction that hurt starts to happen and pain starts to happen. And I think that's what we're witnessing, you know.
I mean, I think this is probably the other indicator of how much better I'm feeling, is that probably a couple of weeks ago, if you'd floated the notion of like worldwide revolution, I'd have probably been up for it. But there is elements to which there's always like uncertainty and sort of discomfort in, you know, certain populations. It's just right now we happen to be feeling it. I don't know, man. Let's say tax them the same as they tax everybody else. Like, if they're going up into space, make sure it's for like scientific purposes, not just a fucking jolly. And they'd probably find themselves a lot better received. You know what I mean? Like, but the obscene amount of wealth, it's like, deal with some actual shit first before you start playing with your toys. You know what I mean? Look to the examples. I mean, Carnegie, Rockefeller, these guys were horrible bastards. I mean, like, honestly, like Rockefeller, one of the, you know, held up in one of the highest regards in American history, was an rip-roaring thunder cunt of a human being. So he was like universally hated. But like, history remembers these guys fondly, because the end result of their being absolute bastards was that society moved forward in spite of them, and because of them and in spite of them. And I think if they want to be seen in a modern day setting in a better light, they need to start thinking along those kind of lines, is that this is all ultimately for the greater good of me and the promotion of me and my interests. But if I actually like use this just pornographic level of wealth to actually help people, then you know, maybe I'll get an easier ride. You know what I mean? Like, but the ride's pretty easy as it is.
Absolutely,
You know what I mean? Like,
absolutely. Well, we're at Bill, mate.
I think so.
Aye, man, that was good. Enjoyed that.
Enjoyed it myself. Good to be back.